Okay, welcome and thank you for joining us for another episode of the Jain Irrigation Training Series. I'm your host, Richard Rastusha, and today we're going to be talking about SWIIM on-farm water accounting. And a lot of people have asked me, this week I've been getting the phone calls, how does an accounting software help you save water? And I said, well, this is what you really need to tune into because it's not necessarily financial accounting, dollars and cents necessarily, but how do we keep track of water, which is becoming so important to growers throughout the United States? And better yet, how do we use some sort of software to manage that? So taking us through this today is our guest, Kevin France. Now, Kevin's the co-founder and former CEO of SWIIM. He's been involved with SWIIM as a co-founder for a little over 14 years now. He's been really dedicated to water conservation and ag water in general. Anybody who's been to Western Growers in the last few years recognizes Kevin right away. He really helped that association move forward with technology in irrigation for agriculture. Kevin's testified before Congress talking about water conservation and how to grow more sustainably. We're really fortunate to have him on today to take us through SWIIM accounting software. And so Kevin, welcome. Thanks for joining us today.
Richard, thank you. It's an honor. I'm happy to be here.
Yeah, I'm real happy you're here too. I've got to know you a little bit over the years and a lot more, the past couple months, and you've got a lot to offer. So I'm really excited to hear what you have to say today. Now, Kevin, you as a co-founder and being around, 14 years with SWIIM, what was kind of the motivation? What was the spark that got you involved in this?
That's great. Great question. We went down kind of a different path, right? So we started SWIIM as a spinoff from a research and development project that came out of USDA and a couple of regional land grant universities. And we were doing, I like to joke, we were doing ag tech before there was any such thing as ag tech. You had ag and then you had technology.
Right.
But they weren't quite migrated yet to this fancy term we call ag tech now. But it started with a 5.5-year research and development project co-sponsored with the U.S. Department of Ag, Colorado State University, Utah State, and some folks from Fresno State all came on board. We actually formed this advisory board that met every so often. It was about once a month. And we used significant research grade analytics, when we're driving the SWIIM model. And so what was important for us is that we would garner support from those that were respected in the space, because back when we started this, of course growers were looking to save water and be as efficient as they could be, but you had this conundrum, and specifically we originally started in Colorado and then we migrated over to California and hit the western states from there. But you have this conundrum where the amount of water you apply to a field isn't necessarily the same. Well, it's never the same as consumed water. And the value of that water, right, is determined by the consumptive use value, not the applied. And the reason for that is because the non-consumed water that's applied generally recharges the system and recharges someone else's water right? So that was important to get our arms around it. And our goal was to, over these 5.5 years, we had a plot that USDA managed. I think we were like the heaviest instrumented farm west of the Mississippi that was trying to figure out how to quantify a water balance, because, balancing water, that's the first question I get asked, is the inputs versus the outputs. It's the same way you balance your checking account. Inflows of cash, outflows of cash, where that money's going, both inward and outward, and accounting for it and trying to balance out that account. So that was our journey. We started there. Once we had a technology that was patentable, we went ahead and did that, and then created the brand name SWIIM, which others ask me what SWIIM stands for. It stands for, because it's SWIIM with 2 I's, Sustainable Water and Innovative Irrigation Management. So that's what it stands for. Again, sustainable water, innovative irrigation, and innovative irrigation management. And then so we started deploying, and then we ran into our friends over at Western Growers out in California, and they saw a need for the platform to help their growers protect their water allocation. And the whole goal is to get your arms around that very valuable input to a farming operation and give the power back to the grower to protect that water right. Because unlike other inputs into a farm, there's no substitute for your water allocation.
Very true. Very true. So one question I have, that group that you originally got together, that advised, how did you, that's like an all-star team of people contributing to ag irrigation. How did you get all those people together?
So I herding cats for a while there, to be perfectly candid. Get a room full of 15 PhDs and you have a whole new experience. That's all I can say about that. But in all seriousness, we had the best of breed researchers in ag from the federal level, state land grants. We had prominent growers, right? They've been around the block, multi-generational growers. We had the business community in there. And it was an open session. It was called the Disarm Committee. That's what we named it. And it was hosted generally at USDA's offices. Sometimes we do in California, sometimes in Colorado. And it allowed for open discussion. So we do this research in the field, we bring it out and show everyone the results and have them pick it apart. And what's the best way to earn respect and trust is to do it that way. And that helped hugely, Richard. I gotta be honest with you, that those were the most influential times during SWIIM's initial evolution. And it led to eventually, I think we have 3 or 4 patents on the technology now. The first one was co-developed by the USDA. So that's the amount of impact that they had into the model. And then it resulted in something that folks could get behind.
Yeah, and then you mentioned too, prominent growers. That I think of Western growers as all prominent growers, and you guys were the first technology group represented by their technology platform. I know I'm getting close here.
Yeah, you are. So we actually formed a relationship with them before that platform. That's how old we are.
Yeah.
I guess as a technology, again, we predated ag tech, and we predated the Western Growers Innovation Center. So we chatted with them, and you could see why Western growers would see value in this, right? They're worried about policy, laws. They're worried about anything that gets in the way of their growers being able to grow, provide food for the world, which it's a monumental task. So their focus around water shouldn't surprise anyone, right? Because that is a component that is fluctuating, constantly in flux, and without it, you're pretty much out of luck. So it was very easy for them to get behind it. And of course, after I joke, they did more due diligence than any of our other partners did over time, because Western growers are concerned about their name, right? They don't just partner with any Tom, Dick, or Harry. So they spent, I would say, a year and a half, looking over the research, talking with the USDA folk, talking to growers during our piloting stages, and then they got to a level of comfort that we were the real McCoy.
Yeah, and definitely, I could see the success there when I'd go to the Western growers meetings and see your presentations and see how behind it they were. So
yeah, appreciate it.
Anyway, I just want to mention we've got the Q&A open and the webinar chat also. So if you have some comments or questions for Kevin, put them in there and I'll ask when it's appropriate. And Kevin, I'd love to see the presentation.
Appreciate it. Dive in. Feel free to interrupt as questions come in. So the 5 things I'm going to look to touch on here today, at least at a high level: how SWIIM on-farm water accounting works, how it saves water, why you would want to account for water at that level of granularity, how to use the water accounting to increase water on your operations, sell, trade, bank that water, why it's easier to do it with something like SWIIM, why this works for water agencies and individuals alike, and how SWIIM on-farm water accounting ensures accurate billing and record keeping. So with that, let's start with a bit about SWIIM. As I mentioned here in the overview, we're backed by 5.5 years worth of research and development, 3-4 patents, I want to say at this point. One of them was, the first one was developed by the USDA, and that was our foundational patent, and then we went from there. And so what SWIIM effectively is a software delivered crop water budget accounting system that provides services similar to what a CPA or an accounting firm would provide for your financial accounts, right? So They're balancing our financial budgets, whether it's personal or corporate, company-wise. They're looking at where all the money's coming in from and where it's going, and sub-accounts of where that money's going. So some of that money's going to rent, some of it's going to salary if it's a company, some of it's going to keeping the lights on. So these sub-accounts are important when you're making business decisions and finding out how healthy your company is, or individually speaking, from a financial standpoint. Well, SWIIM does that same, or performs that same job for water. And so what we in essence do is we provide mesh delivery and consumption reports by field. So they're meshed together. And I'll talk about that here in just a moment. Near real time, it's backed with the research and development of folks that are way smarter than I am. And the key here is when delivery and consumption is, I like to say, temporally tracked together. So it's happening in time, right? Everyone in ag understands you're applying water over a specific period of time. That crop is consuming water in parallel with that consumption. It's happening in a near real-time fashion. So if you don't have the data, you're in essence, while it's happening near real time, you're in essence Monday morning quarterbacking any kind of conservation effort you might think you want to do. And so what we have found, and these are clients telling us this, that by having that data available to them throughout the crop cycle and throughout, each and every week, basically, they can sit down and get in front of issues that they see either physically in the field with regard to their irrigation infrastructure or other change practices that will conserve water. One of the biggest things that they get out of this is this consumptive use fraction. The only way you can get that is by balancing the water budget. If you have all application of your water by field sitting on one bucket here, and you have all consumption sitting in another one, and they're not tied together, you can't get that fraction because you divide the two into each other, and that's what gives you this percent efficiency. So like as an example, the grower example on the slide has an 87.5% consumed fraction or irrigation efficiency. That's how much water was applied out of that which was, how much was consumed out of how much was applied. So 100% applied. So that's a pretty high consumed fraction, depending on the irrigation method, the region you're in, the crops you're growing. Obviously, that's going to vary. But the point is you start by a baseline number. And some of our growers start as low as 20, 30%, as you can imagine. Some start a little bit better. But the key here is you start with that baseline, and then you can go from there and measure beyond. And so that baseline starts the first year they use us, or the first crop cycle they use us. And then their goal is to improve. And we have case studies abound of growers that started super concerned, whether it's groundwater in Central Valley, Colorado water down in SoCal, and the lack of water or a potential reduction, and how do they grow around it? That was the question a lot of our growers were asking. Within 2 to 3 years of using SWIIM, they made it through some really tight times. And, I'm proud of that.
So we've got our first question. First question's coming in, Kevin, and that question is this: so it doesn't matter how I irrigate?
Well, I'm not sure I'd say that.
No. It doesn't matter. I think they're saying it doesn't matter. I can use SWIIM no matter how I'm irrigating.
That I can answer that question. Yes, I've worked on all irrigation methods. We've been on furrow, pivot, long row irrigation. We've been on drip. A lot of our customers have basically all 3 buckets, either within their operation. We have a couple of folks down in IID that are like that. Or in different regions, right? So yeah, it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter to get the water balance. Of course, the question of how you get more efficient from furrow to sprinkler to drip is a whole nother discussion.
Right.
Yeah. That answer your question?
Yeah. So no matter what they're using irrigation wise, they can still use the SWIIM system. Any
method of irrigation. We've been on every kind of crop you can imagine. I'm sure there's ones we haven't been, right? Because no one's been on everything, except maybe Jain, but we were on perm annual. I mean, you can think about high value crops, low value crops. The point is you do eventually reach the point of diminished return where you have to justify the cost, the ROI against the crop, right? The value of the crop. But what we find is generally the lower value crop, the less granular they are in the water balance. In other words, they might put 2 or 3 or 4 fields together and do one water balance around those fields, where the more expensive crops, especially perm crops, they're doing on a much smaller scale.
Yeah, that's interesting too, because I was just thinking about this, right? From what you said, this could work for controlled environment ag, or, in an alfalfa field out in El Centro. Doesn't matter.
Doesn't matter. And we have examples of every type of operation within that umbrella, as you mentioned, Richard, in different regions. So that speaks truthfully, because that's how it is today. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. So the takeaway here on this slide is when you take delivery and consumption, you mesh them together through a mathematical calculation, which is dividing one into the other. Basically, you get a percentage, and so that allows you to set a baseline and then improve against it. So what does a water balance do? I think that's actually one of our questions. It basically keeps track of how much water enters and leaves the field or fields during a season. So of course there's inputs. Everyone probably on this call knows, high level at least, what those are. You irrigate. If you're lucky, you have rain. We have customers that obviously don't have a lot of that, even in decent times. And then the water leaves the system, right? Evapotranspiration for growth of the crop, surface runoff, and then subsurface runoff. Well, each of these inputs can be dissected into a level of sub-accounts using my earlier example of accounting. And it allows you to make decisions you could otherwise not make if you weren't tracking those 2 components, again, delivery and consumption at the same time. And I'll talk a little bit more about that later. In SWIIM's case, this isn't sampled data. So there's other solutions that have come and go that have used sampling, right? So they might take 1 or 2 measurements in the course of a day. We see a lot of that, to be honest, in SoCal, Southern California. And then they use some kind of mathematical equation to estimate the delivery, especially with open channel. Or they use sampled data from other sources that isn't really tracking the consumptive use near real time. So it's a sampling versus real-time field-wide survey or field-wide data each and every day. And basically what this does is it provides a survey, a water survey, if you will, of your operations each and every day. It's being done by pushing data to the cloud. So we grab some field level data, regional data, satellite data, and push it all together. And again, it's very similar to balancing your checkbook. It's almost the same. It's the best analogy I've been able to come up with doing this for 14 years. All right, reasons to do water balance. Well, first one right out the gate, multi-dimensional look at your water, application and consumption. It lets you, again, look at it with a level of granularity I guarantee you most folks didn't even know existed, right? They might have a cumulative amount of water applied, cumulative amount of water transpired, but certainly not to the level of granularity SWIIM can provide, and certainly not meshed together so that you can see the yin and the yang of those 2 components. It's a measure of best irrigation practices. Obviously, the higher irrigation efficiency, the more efficient you are, theoretically. Allows you to flag under and over irrigation conditions throughout the season. In other words, you don't have to wait a very long time to see if there's a problem, and you get in front of it. And again, it's that Monday morning quarterback example I gave earlier. Helps you determine when to irrigate. This is one of the things that excites the living daylights out of me about Jain's acquiring of the company, is Jain has so many other tools that are going to add a level of granularity that SWIIM doesn't even have today. And by putting SWIIM into the back end, it's going to do the same thing. And so, irrigation scheduling is something we wanted to do and didn't get to in our evolution. There's lots of things now that I see the pathway for through bringing SWIIM into the Jain family that we could only have wished about years ago. Monitoring and reporting of water use for regulatory agencies. This is a big one, right? So whether you're in Central California with SGMA and the groundwater monitoring and reporting, whether you're down in Southern California and you get your reports from the irrigation district and you're looking to compare against something, right? So you want to maybe get an independent view of water use compared to what the agency says. And by the way, we see that in Arizona, we see that in a little bit in Colorado, Central California. That's the way to get it, right? It's kind of getting an independent view of things. Improve yields, reduce water use, all the things that you can imagine. But the key here is it's against an established baseline. The baseline is established, it's quantifiable, and then you can quantify from there. And some years you're going to go down, some years you're going to go up, but hopefully the trend line ends upward at the end of the rainbow, so to speak.
Yeah.
Benchmark. Oh, go ahead.
Kevin, I've got a question here. Why is it important to monitor and report water use for regulatory agencies? Aren't they doing it for you?
They are. Most of them are. Most of our clients tell us, though, that they want a second opinion. So here's an analogy one of our dairy farmers used down in up in the Central Valley. They equated it this way, and I like the examples, so I'm going to share it. IRS comes in and sends you an audit request, right? They're going to audit your taxes. They don't like the way your taxes look. You're not going to go to the IRS and say, hey, let's use your people and your data to confirm that, because they've already reached their conclusion, hence the reason that probably that they're auditing you. What you do is you go to a third-party group that has some credence behind them, and then they review everything, and then they're your trusted advocate when you go in front of the IRS. It's not exactly like that, but there's times when our growers are like, I don't think the consumption that's being, because some of these districts look at consumption versus application, some mesh them together. They're all different. But the point is that our growers, our clients, have been growing on that field for, in many cases, multiple generations. They kick the dirt every day. They know what should be happening on their farm. And quite frankly, they know better than others that are looking in from the outside in. So, yes, you could take that data at face value. Many of the growers that we work with want a second opinion.
Yeah, and it's no shot at the government or the water agency.
Nothing.
Just saying, hey, mistakes happen sometimes. There's a lot of data, a lot of information, a lot of customers. So it's
That's it. Yeah, no shot. I mean, look, the government's going to do the best that they can, right? They're servicing an entire area, and they're trying to balance out costs, resources. But it's just sometimes it's better to have your own data.
Yeah.
Last thing on this slide, benchmarking SWIIM certification. This is a service we offer our growers. Some of them use it, especially if they are in somewhat control of their supply chain, where they can put onto their product marketing. We have a couple almond growers, a couple citrus growers that are using this. They might use it on their website. They may use it in their marketing materials outside of their website. Totally up to them. But we basically, if they go to the basic level of water measurement and accounting, and they will meet with our team throughout the year to improve. And as long as they can show either a sustainable increase or not a reduction after they started using SWIIM, we will honor them with the certified stamp. And that's something we started. Growers still use it today. Love to see that continue because it sets that baseline. And it gives an edge. Think about it, we go into the store now, and you're going to go to a certain place for organic, going to another place for product that was produced with the absolute least amount of water possible, and still a good product. That's what the message we're trying to tell here.
Yeah, which is a great message, and glad you guys are really started this.
Appreciate that. Yeah, it's been a fun journey. I got to tell you, very fun journey. Let's look at the inputs for a water balance. This is what SWIIM's taking in to reach that magic consumed fraction, and of course other data sets that are provided in the robust reporting. But we look at the irrigation and the rain, obviously rainfall, any place where water's coming in. So that's rain, deliveries, whether it's surface or pipe, irrigation deliveries, and then crop specific evapotranspiration. It's specifically keyed into the crop that's in the ground. Field size is important, crop info. Then planting and harvest date, because it gives us that bookend or the bookmark, right, from the start to the end of the report. That's the area we're measuring. So we do need to have planting or first bud date as well as harvest date. You can use it to compare against additional data. So some of our growers use it with soil moisture data, plant health data. Some of them have other weather stations that they integrate in. It's very robust and allows you to really use the best data for the region, because one thing with ag, everyone's not using the same methods to consume, right, or to measure consumption. So SWIIM allows you to customize that, and the list really is, for better or for worse, endless. The visual data, or I should say, a visual version of the consumptive use data. A lot of folk are probably already used to seeing in Jain's dashboard. We offered that in our previous platform, and I know that's migrating over now to Jain. But the same data, here's the key thing, the same data that you can visually inspect to see what's happening in certain areas of your field is the same data used to generate the water balance. So, you know, it's turning into something that's analytical and trackable and quantifiable to something that's a little less quantifiable, maybe more qualitative, but it's the same data. And we were using weekly ET, you guys all are too, so it's the same format of data. The key here, though, again, what excites me is that Jane's done a just fabulous job of developing both, I know, organically and through acquisition, a whole suite of tools around water conservation and efficiency. I've listed a couple of them here. And the thought that SWIIM would be able to go in and improve, maybe that's not the right word, but maybe make a little more precise some of these other tools. And then, of course, I think it's going to flip the other way, because the data sets you guys have to be able to feed back into SWIIM, since SWIIM is data agnostic, is going to even add a new level of precision and accuracy that we weren't even able to attain early on. So that's what's exciting me about that component as well. And I know that's part of the plan.
I totally agree with you there, right? All the things, this is just when Jain acquired the assets of SWIIM, this was just more input, more data to make what was, Jain Logic, something already really great, even better. And really happy that Jain made the investment, that's for sure.
Appreciate that. All right. So what SWIIM does is it simplifies an otherwise complex process. So counting for water seems easy, right? How hard could it be? Inputs and outputs. But think about it on this graph, and I think that might change your perspective. Some of our growers have surface water from their district, or just not from their district, just from wherever they're getting it from. Some might have groundwater. Some have both. Some have, unfortunately, neither. But the point is you have two different types of water, two different costs associated with them, and depending on the plumbing on the farm, they may be dropped into a reservoir, they may not be, but you have that component, and it all becomes part of the pool of available water right here. That water then gets disseminated out to farms, and then respectively, theoretically, to fields, and there's an applied component and there's a consumed component, as we talked about earlier. SWIIM is gathering data at each of these question marks, which no other system is that I'm aware of. And so bringing that all together in something that actually makes sense, one thing our growers have said is they've tried to, through either different solutions, or they plug in multiple solutions, they've tried to get to this point. By the time they get the data out of it and they attach the consumed data, it's nothing that's actionable. It's nothing that makes sense to them. And so that's what SWIIM looks to do, is to bring that data together. Right. So a different view of that would be your water sources. We gather that through pump and gate data, and then we throw it into the SWIIM cloud. We use weather data and satellite data meshed together. We're going to talk about that here in a moment. Field and crop data inputs in to tell us those components we need for the water balance, and then we use under our research with USDA the crop production functions just as a baseline, and that kicks out effectively a water balance report. Water in, water out, net water surplus or deficit. And that report can stay at the farm office within the operations, or that grower can agree to transfer it to the district, depending on the reason they might want to do that. Not all of our customers do, but a good number of them do for various reasons.
Yeah. So Kevin, we've got a couple of questions coming in now that I just want to take right now. I think it's appropriate. One,
sure.
As far as certain crops, does this work better for some than others? And then more importantly, do you have any wine vineyard data or customers in the vineyard business? We
do have a couple. We weren't really able to penetrate that market as much as we wanted to, but the stressing of vineyards, maybe that's resonating with a couple of the folk out in the audience. So the short answer is yes, we do have some application there. We have way more almonds and citrus using it, to be candid, that are kind of in that high value crop space, a lot more data there. But the key here is that even if it's a crop that we happen not to have, we have those crop production functions in the system. So we can easily, do the same water balance type of work with those crops. But so that's the short answer.
Yeah. Okay, great. Thank you. And then another question is this, will you be providing some real examples of customer improvements?
That's a good one. So the push-pull of not sharing too much information. This is going to surprise literally no one on this seminar. Our growers, for some reason, don't want us to talk about what they're doing. And so we're very sensitive. So we do have a couple of case studies. I haven't fed those into this particular presentation. Happy as a follow-up to send to them. There's one specifically that I can think of in Helm. He's a very pretty prestigious grower. He's spoken publicly about how SWIIM impacted him. When he started with SWIIM, he wasn't sure if it was going to be useful, right? He was a little questioning of it, fair enough. But what he did know was because of the restrictions his GSA was going to push in, he was expecting $1 million hit on his operation from the reduction of water and actually pulling crop out from crop he had in. I started using SWIIM, and then that first year he ended up using about 18, give or take, % less of his water, which was a direct dollar savings, but it kept 100% of his crop in operation. Next year, he got about another 15, 16%, and then he leveled off, and he didn't get a whole bunch beyond that, but SWIIM allowed him to stay at that point. He never absorbed the $1 million loss. That's the one that comes to mind. And I mean, he still talks about it today, which shouldn't surprise anyone. So we do have more case studies on that, but there's definitely folks that will talk about their success with SWIIM.
Yeah, and it's interesting too, because the 18% reduction or so, that made the difference between being in business or out of business. Sure, it was like an all or none. A small percentage made an all or none difference. Yeah,
it saved on his water bill. So there's a two-pronged deal here. Saved on his payments to the district, because in his region, he's paying a lot for pumped water, and he didn't have to pull anything out of the ground.
Yeah. That's
the kind of case study that brings a warm fuzzy to me. It makes me warm about it, because those are the types of case studies and types of examples we originally started SWIIM to help fix.
Yeah. Yeah. Very neat. Got it on both sides. I love that.
Yeah. All right. Onward. Let's talk about how this works a little bit. We'll peel the onion back just a bit more, but not too much. The water balance equation is basically water in minus water consumed is water surplus or deficit. So the system's patented. Our water data has been accepted by state agencies in California, Colorado, and Arizona. So it's something that I'm going to call it. I mean, obviously, the state's not going to come back and say SWIIM is the only option, but they've accepted our reports, both regionally and at the state level. It's supported by both satellite data and weather data. And we're going to talk about why that's important here in a moment. But and then the customized crop evapotranspiration models take into account your operation. So the takeaway here is that doesn't matter the crop type, doesn't matter the irrigation method, SWIIM will work on that operation, because it's just measuring the ins and the outs very precisely. The takeaway slide for you: if you already have equipment in the field, you can likely benefit from an enhanced water accounting data solution like SWIIM with little or no additional cost. So what that means is, if you have equipment in the field and it has telemetry and it's pushing it, in this case, to the Jain platform, adding SWIIM becomes just a pure software as a service addition. It's an additional offering, because SWIIM, as we integrate it into the Jain infrastructure, will be able to take that data and operate with very limited, if any, additional equipment. So this is really an easy add-on for folks to utilize and see the benefits of.
Yeah, I love that, because again, in the sustainability model, you're not having to repurchase a bunch of other equipment and waste the old. You can take advantage of what you already have. That's awesome.
Exactly. We like to that point, Richard, we like to call it the water balance, or the SWIIM umbrella. So SWIIM sits on top of whatever equipment that's in the field and provides enhanced data. I've called it in the past the Pro Tools of water use data. So most folks have some level of water use data, even if they're going out to a field and manually recording the meter, which is like the far right side of the spectrum, or they have some level of analytics going into the system for cum water flow. And maybe if it's even by field or even by block, SWIIM takes it to 2 or 3 steps further and really gives you an insight to the data set that might help you really create some change within your operation. We're going to talk about that next. So here's some screenshots of the report. You can see here on your screen, there's a summary here on the right about the farm or the field. And again, with our water balance offering, it can be as granular as a block. We have clients that are doing block level water balance, so we balance the water balance at that granular of a level. Some are fields, some have multiple fields within one water balance report, and it just all varies. And so it can scale up or scale down depending on what you're looking to accomplish. We give a short little review here of water volume and the value of that water. So in the system, we key in a value to that water. And let me tell you, what I have been told by our customers is that when they start seeing it in dollars and cents, the data stream, it changes everything. Everything. The way they perceive water applied, where the buckets of use are going, and how they can better create efficiencies. Shouldn't surprise you, but it's the truth. Things like effective rainfall, because we peel that out of the water balance measurement. And of course, that consumed fraction, or we call it, off the cuff irrigation efficiency, is in every report. So you can start seeing your baseline and seeing if it's up or down. In this case, this grower's not doing too shabby at 83.5% efficient. Fields summarized, and then the level. Remember I talked about, Richard, the accounting and the accountant comparison. This should totally resonate at this point.
Yeah.
Line by line, everything that's happening on your farm. We're gathering this through equipment and through satellite data and through other data sources, but we're tracking it behind the scenes, just like your bank's tracking every transaction that goes in and out. You download it into some program, QuickBooks or whatever the case may be, and it's all there in front of you. So obviously our growers aren't going into this every day and looking at that, but having the data there, and now I think you can see the value, I'm hoping, to a district and or a grower to have that level of granularity.
Yeah, I love that. And I love putting the dollar amount there too, because again, that's what really makes you sit up and take attention. That's
true, Richard. And the other thing that off of that point that you just brought up, in some cases, our growers, you see down here, cost/value. Some will use the cost of the water. Some will use the value of the water. And why is that important, right? Some folks want to know the cost component and how they can reduce costs. In some of the regions we operate, though, if they save either delivered or consumed water, there's a price to be paid, whether it's a banking credit, whether it's a transfer credit from another user. Selling that water, that drop of water, not the water allocation, but the actual water. On that point, they want to know the value. And so growers will use either or depending on what they're trying to accomplish, as well as the volume. And so, yeah, so this is a delivery report. This is the applied component of the water balance, right? So deliveries, it shows up in many different forms, different types of reports you can configure. We start with, like any company, we start with the basics, and then growers can refine it as they want to go. One of the things that I teased early, and the reason why we believe our consumptive use data is above reproach, is we use 2 methods that are intertwined, and that is weather station data and satellite data. And so what ends up happening is you've got a challenge with both sources, right? Satellite only comes over at some point, takes a snapshot. It's real ET of the field. It's actually ETA, it's actual ET, but it only happens sporadically. Right. And then weather data, the benefit of that is you can use crop assumptions and engineering calculations to map out what the consumptive use curve should be, right, for that crop. But again, it doesn't take things into account like crop stress and other things that could really affect the outcome of that. So we believe using one or the other is probably not the best call. Instead, we use both, and they're integrated in, and this is how it works. So we use satellite image as often as we can get it. And what also excites me is I believe Jain has more iteration of satellite than we even do right now. So if that's the case, it's all it's going to do is shorten the space in between here and make that curve even more precise. But we use weather data when we don't have it to estimate what the crop curve or the crop production water use curve should be. And then we get another satellite image, and it might be a little higher or lower of that line. And so we'll go back to the last one and adjust the curve. That's what the software does, and continues. And each point thereafter, by using those two data sources, it's a bit of a check and balance. And our growers can actually go in and choose just weather, just satellite, or both.
Yeah, I like that. Always improving, right? So we have another question coming in, and it has to do with available water.
Mm-hmm.
Does SWIIM consider seasonal or long-term trends in saturated thickness of the groundwater resource?
Wow.
So yeah, seasonal or longer-term trends in saturated thickness of the groundwater resource.
That might be a little out of my pay grade, Richard. So I'll try to answer that one. And if not, that might be a follow-up for our engineers. But what I will tell you is the way that SWIIM comes out of the box is it assumes a full soil profile, right? So we assume pre-irrigations in the date. And if you look at it, just like a bank, it's debiting and crediting that account, right? So when water comes out, it's removing it when it goes back in, regardless of the source. That's how we can pull it out. So there's some exceptions to the rule. We've had some customers that say, look, 100% soil profile doesn't work for my use, and they'll either have soil moisture probes out there and will give us a value that is plugged into the system, or in some other way, it's something less than 100%. That's how we're able to do an accurate water balance, and I should say accurate and consistent water balance without killing ourselves on ridiculous equipment and custom sensors and this and that, which just doesn't work for anyone. So that is how SWIIM works. I'm not sure if that answers the question or not, to be honest, but if it doesn't, we can get offline and get that answered.
Yeah, I'll reach out and get some more specifics around that question so we understand it fully. So thank you for the question, and thank you for the answer.
Okay. So let's move on now. The last slide I'd like to share is what I would call our most popular view. So this is the one component of the reporting, the data set that we provide. Normally it's weekly to the grower through a report, and it will also be eventually resident within the Jain ecosystem through the dashboard as it was historically. This cumulative daily time step water balance. God, that's a long description, isn't it? Cumulative daily time step water balance. What does that mean? Well, that means is, again, as time goes on, things are happening not in a bubble, but they're happening together, right? So we start with this line right here, which is the historical delivery or the target delivery. By the way, this could be set for delivery or consumption, but right in this example, it's just, this is the target we're trying to deliver. By far the most common, because most growers are trying to deliver against a target. It's easier to target something tangible like a delivery number versus consumption. So that's where we want them to target for the season. That data, depending on the region, is input through historical data. We might have 10 years average delivery data for that crop in that field. Some cases, the grower doesn't have that, so we plug in what we believe it should be based off of those. So it all varies. After the first year, though, we have a baseline, and that's our baseline. Then we have the blue line here that shows the deliveries, and this is cumulative of all the sources, right? So this can be pared down into a field or the entire operations water balance. But this is the delivery. And as you can see, the grower, and this is a real example, the grower was south of the delivery, and then just started to peak, but the grower could see at this point, he or she was going over the target and brought it right back down. This is the best visual representation on why you want to look at your water balance throughout the season and not wait the Monday morning quarterback, because I can't guarantee much, but I can guarantee you this. If you didn't have this data in front of you on a regular iteration, they would have been able to dial things back right about here. Yeah. Right? It's like the Fitbit analogy. Like when I was trying to lose weight, I was wearing my Fitbit religiously. I don't think it helped, but the point is if I was listening to the data the way I should have been, having that data set in front of me allows me to make decisions throughout versus Monday morning quarterback and getting on the scale at the end of a week and trying to figure out why I didn't lose weight. That's the analogy I like to use. And you can see it right here. You then have consumed water, right? So this is what the operation or the crops consumed. And the key here is that line that just popped up on your screen, or that gray out on the screen. The delta between delivery and consumed gives an opportunity for savings. And so this is not only shown graphically, visually, where you can see it with your own eyes, but it's also shown in numbers as far as volume of water and, of course, dollars and cents. It gives two different perspectives. You then have, yeah, go ahead.
Really a cool and helpful chart. I could see why you say it's the most popular view.
Our growers tell us it's by far their go-to graph when they want a quick boom on their operation. They'll go to this one.
Yeah.
And the other thing is, then you look at the difference between consumption and either surface or subsurface. And let's talk just briefly about that. In some cases, our growers were measuring subsurface tail flow runoff. If they are, we can separate it from subsurface. If not, we generally, as a default, lump the two together, and that, it's just leaving the system either down south or off the system, right? But the delta there can be optimized as well. So there's two areas here you can see in different shading where there's optimization and you have your target. This is why this particular view. There's more data to it, right? There's more under the hood on it, but this is by far the one our growers are like, yep, this tells us what we need.
Yeah.
So final slide. What can you use saved water for? I get asked this question. It's like the most common question I think I've been asked over the years, and I still answer it. So I'm going to give it another shot here. Grow more with less. So again, we have case studies of higher crop output, less water. If nothing more, some of our customers say because they're watching it in a different kind of this multi-dimension way, decisions have been made that they wouldn't otherwise have been able to avail themselves to without having access to this data throughout the season. Second thing is banking your water for later. We have a lot of clients, most of them in the Central Valley, that are now have the ability to bank their water for a rainy day, so to speak. And for those folks, yes, they could take the rudimentary estimates that their district or consultant is giving them, but most of them, since the dollars and cents are pretty significant, want a higher level. So we'll go instrument the method in which they're charging the system, and we'll give them that. And of course, we've got the consumptive data, so we can go in there and do what we need there. We're giving them way better, more granular data. And so we have customers that are using that just to make sure they're getting every drop they inject, they're getting out in some kind of value. Other thing is lease to another user. So an example of this would be down in SoCal, where there's an established program for safe consumptive use. Our clients can be paid to save. So that's another example. Participate in water conservation programs. So that's the IID example where you get paid to save. Similar, some of these leasing programs that we've helped in the past weren't always district sponsored. It was another grower along the system that wanted access to that water. And so they paid a lease fee to get access to it. We monitored both sides of the deal. Same way a CPA might monitor the finances during a company acquisition or something like that. Last, some regions will allow you to transfer a portion of that saved water, that saved allocation for just a pure payment. And so those are kind of a couple of the 3 or 4 things that I thought of that I've been asked over time. We have case study examples of people doing it. So this isn't conceptual. It's actually happening. And the key here, the takeaway I want to leave you, whether you're trying to improve your operations or trying to really dial in on your water, none of these can really effectively be done unless you're getting a detailed accounting of your applied and consumed water. If I had an example for every client that has come to us in the past that has been through some kind of adjudication or some sort of adjustment in their water allocation through the courts, and when they came in with their data, it was the equivalent of a shoebox worth of receipts. It was handwritten notes or Excel spreadsheets of water use. And then they go in front of the decision maker, whether it's a judge or a district official, and they would look them in the eye and say, this isn't good enough. That's what keeps me up at night still to this day. So those growers, it's a terrible place to be. They have their allocation reduced or removed because they have data, but it's not solid certified data. but through a third party that doesn't have a dog in the fight. And if nothing more, for those folks, I really hope they reach out to you, because the future of ag is hanging on the balance of water availability. We all see it. That's why we started this in the first place. So that's my last. I'm off my soapbox, Richard. That's all I have to share.
Yeah,
it's been a pleasure.
I'm going to jump right up on there too. When I saw the slide before, and you have those 4 reasons, right? These are the 4 reasons why we should really pay attention, because you can't really find 4 better incentives for growers right now than this. It's so important today, more than ever before in the history of agriculture. So, this is the real reason why we should be paying attention. And Kevin, I really appreciate you taking time today to step us through this, because it is so important. Now, with the acquisition of SWIIM by Jain, we're going to have a lot more to add to this, right? So how is this going to integrate with Jain logic? Already the technology that Jain has, and that's going to be very interesting to see as well. And Kevin, I think you're coming back in a couple of weeks, and you're going to show us that with Jeff Toole, so we really see this next step. And so we've got the reasons why today we should pay attention. I think you're going to show us the future, as well as some proof of concept of some people who have actually done some saving and how they did it. So I'm very excited to have you come back in a couple of weeks. But man, great job today. I really appreciate this.
It's been an honor, Richard. When I was given the opportunity to come on, wasn't even a question. Happy to continue to share this. It's so important. I mean, I know growers 2 or 3 or 4 years ago that are no longer growing because they lost their water allocation. And I was having discussions with them 3, 4 years ago. And it's a killer. I mean, it just kills me inside when you have these, multi-generational growers that cannot stay in operation because they can't get a stable water supply. And again, there's no other option. It's not like you can go get water from source B or source C or source D or whatever. It's either you have it or you don't. So that's what keeps me up at night. And I hope that folks continue to persevere for the benefit of all of us.
Yeah, I think that's right? Because if I think about sweat equity, putting all this effort into my farm or ranch, knowing that it's going to be, something I'm going to pass on to my family, or maybe it's going to be my 401k for my retirement. But without the water, you're going to miss out on both of those things. So
absolutely. Thanks again.
Yeah, well, thank you. I want to thank everybody who joined us today for this segment. We really appreciate you joining in. Remember, you can see all of our Jain trainings at jainusa.com/trainings, or wherever you listen to your favorite podcasts. I always love to think that people are out there working today and learning at the same time. That really motivates me to keep going. So thank you, everybody. Kevin, thank you. We are dark next week due to the holiday, but we'll be back in a few weeks. See you all then, and have a great Thanksgiving.